My name is Christian Calderon,
And I'm Michelle Tran.
and today we're here to talk to you about category network impact of top chart behavior. So Dots is a New York City-based mobile game studio.
And Priori Data is a mobile app market intelligence company from Berlin. So over at Priori, we've been around since June 2013, 23 employees, 18 nationalities, and we work with app publishers like Dots to come up with revenue and download estimates for apps in the two largest app stores, iOS and Google Play. And any app publisher that shares their data with us gets free access to our app analytics platform.
So Dots is a mobile gaming studio. We have two games, Dots and Two Dots. 40 employees. Our game, Two Dots, has hit number one in over 100 countries, and we have over 50 million downloads across our network.
So the market for mobile games is huge. In 2015, the two largest app stores, iOS and Google Play, accounted for $25 billion in games revenue. And in 2016 so far, as of February 7th, the games market already accounts for $3 billion in revenue.
So in this particular chart, we're looking at worldwide submissions, app submissions on iOS, and also game submissions on iOS. And you can see that the number is going up and to the right. So this starts in 2012, January 2012, and ends in January 2016. And as you can see, also the percentage of mobile gaming apps as a percentage of total apps has increased. Where it was just above, back in 2012, just above 20%. And over the last year, it's hovered above 35%. So definitely more games as a percentage of total applications are being submitted to the store. This chart shows you that the peaks and troughs of app submissions. So if we look at the month-over-month change since January 2012, we can see that during months like March, November, December, there's been an increase in app submissions, game submissions. And in January, June, and September, there's been a month-over-month decrease in gaming submissions. So this might be helpful for someone that's planning a launch, thinking about what months are good to launch a title in.
Okay, so for the rest of this presentation, we're going to focus on a specific platform in a specific geography, namely the iOS App Store in the US. So in 2015 alone, gaming apps accounted for 2.4 billion installs. These installs accounted for 34% of total application installs. And so here we're showing some of the seasonal trend over 2015. We've plotted monthly installs per gaming app. And as you can see, the trend in volume of installs per gaming app kind of reflects the graph that Christian was showing earlier of the different troughs for gaming app submissions. You can see that January and July are relatively high months in terms of installs per gaming app. This corresponds to the, peaks or the troughs in submissions. And you can see generally that the trend seems to be decreasing over time. So, what percentage of new apps broke into the top 100 in 2015? Does anyone want to? Okay.
Anyone want to guess what percentage of new apps broke into the top 100? So raise your hand if you think it's less than 10%. Okay, all right, put your hands down. Raise your hand if you think it's less than 1%. All right, you guys are very smart. No wonder we're here at Casual Connect.
Yeah, so in 2015, actually less than 1%, so 4 in 1,000 new games made it into the top 100 free overall for iPhone. And when it comes to the top 10, we see about a quarter of that number. 1 in 1,000 new games made it into the top 10 on that list. So the following two numbers are interesting too. If you look at how how the number of games breaking into the top charts has changed over time. So here we've plotted an index of number of new games that broke into the top 100 in the gray line, and number of new games that broke into the top 10 on the orange line. And as you can see, even though the number that breaks into the top 10 is remaining mostly stable over time, the trend is basically flat, the number breaking into the top 10 is increasing over time. So can anyone guess, do App Store features help you break into the top 100?
So raise your hand if you think, yes, App Store features help you break into the top 10. Put your hand up if you think that's a true statement. Cool, you guys, great minds think alike.
Yeah, so actually 63%, so the majority of new games that made it into the top 10 in 2016 so far were featured beforehand. And how many of these, can you guess how many of these features were actually on the main App Store page?
So raise your hand if you think that more than 50% of these top 10 features were on the main page. So more than 50%. And then raise your hand if you think that less than 50%.
So actually all of them were on the main App Store page. Okay, so now let's look at this data from a different angle. Here in the donut chart on the left, we have a graph here of total App Store features that we've seen so far in 2016. And you can see that 9% of these features, so about 200, were allocated to newly released games. And if you limit your analysis to just main page App Store features, you see that newly released games are better represented. So 26%, that's quite a bit larger than how much they're represented in App Store features as a whole. Okay, so on this graph, we're kind of exploring the relationship between number of games that broke into the top 100 overall and number of featured games. And the size of the bubbles here corresponds to the size of the category in terms of app count. So as you can see up in the upper right-hand corner, sort of to be expected, arcade, puzzle, and action games tend to have more features, more unique featured apps, and tend to have more unique apps breaking into the top charts.
What do you think the main takeaway from this slide?
Yeah, and also one should note that there is a positive correlation between number of featured games and number of top 100 apps. This makes sense because a feature can lead to breaking into the top 100 and vice versa. So here we've scaled both axes on the graph by the size of the category to get a really interesting view. And when you look at this graph, you can kind of make statements about the odds of being featured or breaking into the top 100 based on which category you're in. So as you can see in the top right-hand corner, role-playing games, even though it's one of the smallest categories actually in terms of app count, has a relatively one of the highest frequencies of number of featured games and number of games breaking into the top 100 relative to its size. So you can see that, for example, role-playing games, if you compare it to trivia right here above the 30, has about 3 times as many featured games and also about 3 times as many top 100 games. So now Christian's going to go into a few case studies. But before we do that, we're talking about a lot of different types of market shocks, and it's really important to understand the role that major platforms, such as Facebook, Google, and Apple, play in these top chart dynamics that we're about to dig into. So these 3 companies alone generated 76% of top 10 ranked downloads in 2015. That's an amazing number.
It's a lot of downloads. So moving forward, we're going to talk kind of about from the perspective of Two Dots. So when we launched our game, how's that game lived through these market shocks and kind of the life cycle of the product. And so the first day is the day of launch, right? Is when we launched the game. So Thursday, May 29th, 2014, this is when we launched Two Dots. So you can see here the team is very happy after spending endless nights of coding and getting the game out. Here we are celebrating the launch of Two Dots. It was a very, very successful hit number 1 in less than a day, held the rank for 14 days at the number 1 spot, and within 48 hours hit number 1 in 70 countries. And you can kind of see, this chart shows you the install rank, or its top 3 rank 30 days post-launch, and you can kind of see it, after 30 days it just stayed within the top 10, even after it dropped down to number 2. One of the interesting things to look at is how the launch kind of affected our competitors and how it affected our network. And at the time, we only had one other game. So the competitor average, kind of this gray line that you see here, is the average rank of Piano Tiles, Ruzzle Adventure, 2048, Candy Crush Saga, Farm Hero Saga. And this shows you that the rank, before we launched the game, their average rank was about in the 20s. Then after we launched, you can kind of see a decay in their average rank over time. So you can kind of see here how it starts off in the 20s, and then it kind of comes down and starts to decay. Another interesting thing to look at is dots. So dots is the blue line. This is our first original title. And at the time, we were not, this is no paid user acquisition here. This is 100% organic. So people are searching dots in the App Store, and they're also picking up 2 dots. They're also picking up Dots Classic. They're picking up our classic game. So you're starting to see an increase in rank organically from our other title dots. So that's something interesting thing to note. So overall, we're increasing downloads for both titles with the launch of 2 dots. So this chart's a little confusing, but I'll explain what's going on here. So we're looking at basically the percent share of downloads within the top 10. So we noted earlier that 76% of downloads in the top 10 are controlled by 3 companies, right? So that doesn't leave a lot of market share for the rest of app developers to compete with. And so what we kind of see is this zero-sum characteristics within the top 10. So, and what you'll notice here is kind of 2 things. You notice above this 25% mark, really not more than one app category at any given time is up there. So you can kind of see this spike here, this yellow line, this is dots, this is 2 dots, so we're a puzzle game. So when we launched, we took about 35%. Previously, we had the arcade category here, which peaked out close to above 40%. And so when we launch our game, you kind of see that category of installs kind of come down, and you can kind of see the impact there. Also here towards the end, you can kind of see action taking off as puzzle starts to decrease. So you can kind of see there's not more than one category is taking more than 25% of the top 10 downloads at any given time, which is an interesting thing to note. Thursday, June 12th, 2014. Anyone know what this date is?
Can I guess?
Yeah, go.
Was it the World Cup?
Yes, so the largest sports event in the world, the World Cup, was also the day that 2 dots dropped from number 1 to number 2. And this is part of the reason why, soccer fever. So not only being the largest sports event in the world, this event was heavily featured by Apple. And you can see a lot of sports apps here and games being featured by Apple. The one app that stood out the most was Watch ESPN. And you can see it hit number 1. It took about a day to hit number 1 after the World Cup, and it held that rank for 5 days. And it starts to drop off here. This was a very unfortunate time for the United States of America. This is when we dropped out of the World Cup. We lost to Belgium. So don't shake your head over there. That's not a funny thing. So unfortunately, you can kind of see the rank drop down. And if you look at it in kind of the same analysis that we looked at earlier, you can kind of see 2 dots here. This is Watch ESPN, other World Cup apps. This includes FIFA, Univision, Deportes, Soccer Stars, and FIFA by EA Sports. And if we kind of zoom in to see what's going on here, this was a very stressful time for me, being the UA guy at Dots, because so you can see it kind of it increases. And Watch ESPN increases in rank, and 2 dots falls. And the same thing when Watch ESPN decreases, we can gain market share, and 2 dots increases. So you can kind of see at a smaller level the zero-sum game characteristics between these 2 applications. So we're either gaining market share or we're losing market share. And then you can see right here, after the United States loses the World Cup, drops out, this rank, their rank falls, and Two Dots picks up rank. So bad thing for the United States, good thing for Two Dots. And then this is the category impact. So kind of the same thing here. You can see Two Dots, this was right after we launched the game, so we were controlling most of the market share within the top 10, and then Action takes off and peaks here. Doing so, the puzzle drops, and then you can kind of see as Action takes off again, puzzle starts to drop. So this is when Jelly Saga launched. I'm trying to speed it up here. So Jelly Saga hit number one. Hit number one in less than a day, held number one for 8 days in 50 countries. So almost was as successful as the launch of Two Dots. And you can kind of see here that King comps, and these include Farm Hero Saga, Candy Crush Saga, Candy Crush Soda Saga, Blossom Blast Saga, and Scrubby Dubby Saga, and also the competitors, which is Panda Pop, Cookie Jam, Cube, 1010, and Two Dots. So after the launch, you can kind of see that competitors are affected. There's this little dip here, and then this was cubed, kind of dropped out, and then the competitors picked up rank again here. This is the average rank, and then you kind of see King comps just kind of going down. Also important to note, during this time, King was running a cross-promotion between their applications, trying to send users to other games within their network. So kind of same chart here. So the interesting thing, remember this 25% mark, so really no two apps are going above it. You can kind of see when Puzzle takes off here, the Puzzle and Arcade are kind of sharing about 15 to 20%, and then you hear Games Adventure comes up when Arcade goes down. So these were the 3 case studies that we went over.
All right, so now let's review 7 takeaways that we've covered in this presentation. The first is generally that the mobile games market is becoming increasingly competitive.
Your odds of getting into the top 10 are very low.
The majority of new games that we saw in 2015 that made it into the top 10 were featured beforehand.
Features in top rank are positively correlated.
Some categories, relative to their size, are more likely to receive features than others, and this is what we saw with role-playing games.
Market dynamics among the top 10 exhibit zero-sum characteristics.
And major platforms exacerbate top 10 market dynamics. I mean, if you think about these 3 big companies, 76% of downloads, if you assume that they're not going anywhere, then that doesn't leave very much of the market left, of the top 10 market left for the remaining apps to battle it out over.
So thank you. I want to thank Priori Data for providing most of the data in this presentation. Without them, we couldn't have put these amazing case studies and this amazing data together for you.
Thanks.
Does anyone have any questions? Yep.
Open the mic over.
Hello, Christian, Michelle. My name is Anita. I'm from CPI Average Network from Russia. And I would like to know what are your plans for the future?
So at Priori, we are moving forward with 2 products actually related to a lot of the data that we just showed here, featurings and newcomers to the top charts. Those are made free to anyone who visits our website. And we're moving forward with a couple of really exciting projects. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention. Okay, yeah, but a lot of exciting stuff in store. And of course, if you're an app developer, you get free access to our platform anytime.
At Dots, we're going to continue to make games. We have a really awesome game that's on my phone right now that I'm really, really excited about. And hopefully we launch that pretty soon this year. And yeah, and continuing to grow, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey guys, nice presentation. I love the hockey stick curves.
Thank you.
I call them Viagra curves. But my question is, so you had that chart showing kind of 3 categories that are huge that get featured. What is an underserved category, do you think?
So, yeah, maybe we can go back to this slide, or I don't know that. So a really interesting thing about this category is that even though family is also very large, you don't see that it's one of those categories that's in the upper right-hand corner. So that's also another interesting point. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, great data, and you share the data. It seems to be a lot of backward-looking data and the idea of some analysis of what's sort of gone on by. But the 3 takeaways I got from this is get your game featured, have a game of the same name or order as an existing great game, and launch your game at the same time your country's World Cup team doesn't do very well, which are things that probably aren't in a lot of our developers' sort of control. So in terms of if I was sort of coming out there, what things can I do to maximize my success? I mean, I want to get featured, but I can't necessarily control that. If I don't have an existing game, I can't rename my game to something that's there, and I can't control this thing. So what can I do to try and sort of increase my chances?
Right, no, that's a great question. I mean, I think a part of the presentation was that these market factors are hard to influence, right? And so, so obviously you can't do anything about the World Cup and the United States losing. Those things you can't predict. But you may not want to launch your app during the World Cup, right? You may not want to launch your app during the launch of Jelly Saga. So I think if you kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the market, talk to people in the industry, try to figure out what's going on, and really just come up with a plan. Like try to understand what's happening in the market. Just knowing about this stuff will help you with the launch of your title. And I think that's really the best thing to do. But yeah, it's market factors or things that are inevitable, things that are out of our control, and we just have to do our best to navigate through them. It's a great question. Thanks. Any other questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.